Hey everyone, I'm Elizabeth Williams. This is the podcast with Modern in San Antonio. We are talking about the intersection of art and design in San Antonio and beyond. So it's great to have you all here. Thank you for joining us. We have two fantastic professionals here in San Antonio that we're going to talk with today, specifically on urban design and branding. First, we have Cristina Ziegler. She's a designer and associate with Gensler San Antonio. And we have Dick Liu, and he's a brand design leader and a senior associate at Gensler San Antonio. So thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I thought I'd start out with Cristina. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and your role at Gensler?
Yeah, sure. So as far as being in San Antonio, I actually moved here in 2015 to attend UTSA. After a couple major changes, I ended up in architecture and interior design. So graduated in 2021, and since then I've been at Gensler for about 3 years, where I'm a designer and promoted to associate last year. So
Congratulations.
yeah, now I'm working a lot of primarily on workplace and some retail design, but getting into a lot of other things since we do a lot at our office.
Perfect. Excellent. Hey, Dick.
So I'm Dick Liu. I go back a few more decades. So I started out from the University of Houston in architecture. My wife and I moved up to the Northeast at that time, back in the 90s. And so we settled out in Connecticut for a number of years. Got a little too cold for us up there, so we came back down in 91. Thought we'd settle in San Antonio. My wife's family's from San Antonio. Actually worked here for one day. Wasn't the right fit for me at that firm. So I went quickly to Houston and started working with Gensler back in the 90s. Totally different size firm than it is today. Worked primarily in aviation, retail, mixed use, corporate interiors, you name it. So kind of got the sort of cross gamut of all sorts of projects across the board. In 97, I left that firm and formed my own agency in Houston, a group called Acumen Design. At that time, it was with another partner. And so we had a brand agency that sort of looked at the intersection of like what you're doing today, art and architecture, and the brand is the glue. And so that was sort of our stimulus of how we kind of looked at it holistically. Left in 2017, our regional director who had been following us, and we had reached 20 years at Acumen, and so what better way to kind of reunite and bring brand back into Gensler in Houston in 2017. So we rolled our team back in and started integrating with a larger team back there. And then 2018 had the opportunity to kind of help grow this office. And so regional brand director by name, but I think here in San Antonio, it's fantastic because we get to do a lot of different things, and we've kind of spawned into a lot of different areas in addition to aviation, sports, commercial, retail, all that good stuff.
Got it.
Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. Well, I wanted to start off and just kind of talk about the global brand that is Gensler. I don't know if many of our audience knows that Gensler is a global brand, and it's an architecture firm, graphic design, interior design, and you can go into more detail there. But just tell us a little bit about like how many offices, what are the market sectors, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Gensler is, like I said, back in the 90s, it kind of started out more as an interiors type group. And so it's a very large group that started in 1965. Art Gensler is our founder out of San Francisco, fantastic thought leader in that industry. And over the years, we've kind of grown into a little bit larger capacity. We're about 57 offices worldwide now, a little bit over 6,000 employees. And again, we usually strategically try to start offices in communities that really are connected in the way they think and the way they want to grow and the way that they want to prosper. And so when you look at sort of the areas that we work in, we have 33 distinct practice areas that we play in, from large campuses, strategy, brand, et cetera. And so the benefit is that we've kind of fostered in such a way that we feel like we can be a holistic turnkey service provider on all of our projects. So yeah, we've kind of grown. So we say we're global, but we don't want to scare people off either, but we're very localized. Our office has a big percentage of folks from the San Antonio, Texas region area. We also work as regional. We're about 30 folks here in San Antonio, but in the region, we have Houston, Austin, Dallas, Nashville, San Antonio and now Kansas City is part of our region. So
Sure.
we operate with about 800 people locally.
Wow, that's
So,
great. Fantastic.
thanks.
How would you say that San Antonio maybe is a little bit different than the other Gensler offices? Since you come from the Houston one,
Yeah,
what have you
night and
seen?
day.
I can imagine.
Tell you night and day. I mean, size is something.
Yes.
Our New York office is about 750 folks, but we kind of range East Coast, West Coast. Some of these larger hubs are that size. Houston's about 250, so still manageable. But what we love here in San Antonio is it does still have that studio vibe. We're all connected. 30 folks that are multidisciplinarians that play in a lot of different practice areas. And so the culture is different too. At our size, we are a family and we feel very connected. And in Houston, you have groups of families a lot of times.
Sure.
So each office carries its own different identity and culture, but we really are focused on how we grow this community and how we are seated in with the city and our county.
Since you all have these specializations, we'd love to hear about your thought leadership and how you specifically plug into your office. So as a brand design leader, how would you view the importance of visually communicating like a company's brand and their architecture, interiors? How do you kind of do that?
Yeah, when we talked about brand years ago, it was kind of a buzzword. Now it's kind of like the cost of entry in a lot of ways. I mean, everybody wants to tell their story. We're finding industrial groups that want to tell their stories. Distributors of Coca-Cola want to tell their story. And so we kind of look at a lot of different aspects of how you tell that story. It's not just a logo placement. It's not just an identity placement. It's really all these intuitive markers within your space that really kind of communicate. We're talking about advertising earlier. I mean, that's one overt way of telling it, but it's also the art meets the architecture a lot of times, and how you kind of look at the spatial aspects of it. It's not just 2D, it's very 3D and how we look at these things. And so when we first re-engaged in 2017, my partner Jerry and we both looked at brand more holistically, and we're seeing that a lot of the signage, the brand, and those types of programs were part of the budget at the tail end of the project.
Interesting.
We said we really need to be at the forefront to really integrate it within the process, and so that's what we've been working pretty hard at across the board about making it more meaningful, and then that sort of art and branding is not just within the walls. A lot of times we see it outside as part of the residual kind of placemaking aspect. And those kind of aspects are really kind of the things that really hold the project together. You maybe talk about the brands that are out there like McDonald's and Nike and those guys. I mean, they're the thought leaders in that world as well, where every touch point you turn around has an attitude, a personality, in terms of how it kind of holds together.
And do you find that it's that you easily adapt to each brand, or is it kind of a learning process as you go?
No, it's a learning process. I mean, I think and Cristina knows pretty well that we're not your type of black cape architect that comes in and says my way or the highway and this is how you do it. It's really about collaboration, sitting at the table, understanding what the issues are, what do we want to convey to our audience, who are your new audiences you haven't tapped into, and how do we kind of get to the meat of the table about how we kind of just have a conversation, just like today. It's like that sort of, people have elevator pitches. We want meaningful conversations a lot of times at the table. And so really takes a lot of effort up front, just understanding with all the different stakeholders, not just the CEO or not just the facilities director. It's really trying to understand the whole platform from top down, what's relevant for everybody in that world.
What are some certain like branding touch points within a space that are often overlooked or maybe neglected that you see maybe in other projects, maybe that you haven't worked on, but that are maybe lost opportunities around town?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to that mantra of I see a lot of signage, I see a lot of large wayfinding, but I don't see anything intrinsic as much. We really want intrinsic aspects. I think Christina's probably going to talk a little bit about Jefferson Bank, a project we worked on across the street, new headquarters, interiors based, has a lot of contextualism. It's not really overt in terms of its signage play.
Sure.
It's really about bringing that culture back into to sort of, identify its legacy in that space. And so you'll see a lot of, cultural kind of cues cement tiles, those kinds of things that really kind of makes it more of a San Antonio vibe there
Sure, yeah.
than anything else. And we are very much into understanding how to kind of get a little bit more ingrained. We asked some folks in the past, how do you feel about Gensler? And, it's an education process, being the new kids on the block.
Sure.
Coming into San Antonio, it's like, we usually like to tell people that we can design, a tower down to a bar napkin, in that world. Yeah. And so, looking around town, we've got some great examples. We're sitting in the middle of the Pearl that really understands how it all goes together.
Sure.
But that's hard to build from a brand new aspect and try to get that sort of characteristic built in. And so you want to do it in such a way that it feels authentic, it feels intentional, and it's got to communicate. And so.
Absolutely. Cristina, I'd like to move on to you. As an interior designer, how do you design a space for a neurodiverse population? What are some strategies? It's kind of a buzzword, so to speak, going on right now, and important, obviously. So how do you usually, what are some strategies you use?
Yeah, so first of all, with any project that we're doing, the first thing we want to do is engage with the client who's going to be using the space. And from there, just making sure that we do design for the diverse range of sensory needs. So that can be anywhere from designing different types of spaces for people to work in, so more quiet zones and collaboration zones, or the material palette, possibly choosing calmer colors, not so busy textiles and patterns, or even ambient lighting. People have different sensory needs and they work in different environments. So I think just utilizing all those different details really helps with designing a environment for, an inclusive space.
Sure. Great. And so just for our audience if they're not familiar with those terms, is it a client will come to you and say, hey, we're a tech company. We have maybe a lot of people on the autism spectrum. These are some things that are important to us. And so y'all kind of dig into that specifically, or
yeah, that's a great
maybe,
example.
Yeah. So, or maybe, an ADHD population, I don't want to be too, stereotypy, but sometimes those tend to align. So that's probably. Is there another example you can think of?
It can be pretty general, or a specific company can have those needs. But if it's just general, designing overall for ADHD needs, or maybe it is people on the spectrum, even different disabilities as well. So really a wide range.
Got it. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I can see. I love that the design industries are kind of digging into thinking a lot more about, how people respond to a space and not just kind of interact with it. Just kind of, yeah, that's wonderful.
Right. It's not about how somebody can use the space differently. It's how everybody can all use this space in the same way.
Perfect. Great. So also, what are some programmatic needs and requests of your clients that kind of currently are different than maybe other cities, like in San Antonio specifically? I was just thinking about, maybe Houston has some different, things that they like to see versus, San Antonio. What have you run into?
Right. I think San Antonio is really big on tradition and our history here, which I think is great. I love the culture of San Antonio. So we were talking a little bit about Jefferson Bank, which is a project we just completed. And I think that's a great example. We started off with the client having discussions about really wanting to, what is the future of Jefferson Bank? And we really want to show their core values. Jefferson Bank as a family, their thought process was, let's design for traditionally Texas, while also its close proximity to the Pearl, and how do we bring in those familiar materials with that culture of San Antonio. So that paired with the art that they actually have installed in their space as well. I think that maybe one thing that differs San Antonio from other cities is really how much they want to grasp the culture of San Antonio.
That's really great. If I could add, the flip side on Houston and San Antonio, there are some commonalities in how we approach these things. Obviously, real estate has gone way up on a lot of these types of spaces. And I think what you're seeing a lot more is a lot of these clients are really designing spaces for the employees and their mindsets and how we're going to operate in this sort of post-COVID world. And so we're not doing the traditional program where things are, you got X amount of employees and you got to have X amount of square feet to kind of make that weave together. And so what we're doing is seeing a lot more open spaces, a lot more collab spaces, a lot more hoteling spaces, more transitional kind of areas that are more vignettes, and more like there was a big movement to try to bring your house back into your workplace, in terms of making people feel like they could transition from home to work. But that's one of the biggest things I've seen as part of this shift in the last few months is really people really understanding the psyche of their employees.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I know that the work from home, and there's been a lot of pushback. So it's really interesting to hear what you guys have been experiencing.
Yes, a lot of
in the
amenity
workplace.
spaces, I would say, as well,
Yeah.
and workspaces.
That's great.
Yeah, and I think people miss out on the culture. We had this dialogue with some folks in Phoenix and about coming back to work, and at the height of COVID, we still had our offices kind of transitioning back in, and then slowly everybody's trickling back in. But the constant we saw was a lot of the young folks were coming into the office. They wanted to learn, they wanted to connect, and so it just made sense that we try to bring people back together as much as possible. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. You had mentioned art at the Jefferson Bank. Did y'all incorporate many local artists or regional artists into that, or was it mostly kind of all over the place?
So for Jefferson Bank specifically, they actually had a art curator that they use typically, I guess, for their projects. And that's Karen Calvert. I think it's Karen Calvert Fine Art Services. But so they worked with her to bring in a whole different range of different artists. I'm pretty sure they were all local, I want to say, but all kinds of art really throughout their space. So for that instance, they did work with her to design that. But Nika, another project, we actually worked with Anthony Rose, who is a local artist, and he did the mural in our office, and he actually designed a mural for Nika as well. So that mural has a lot of San Antonio aspects. I think there's the Alamo on there, the Pearl, maybe some rodeo things on there as well. But yeah, sometimes it's a matter of us collaborating with the artist and designing what's best for the space, or bringing in a art consultant to work with the client to fit their needs.
Perfect. Yeah, Anthony Rose, he does some work in Houston too, I think.
He does.
Right?
He started here in San Antonio. He was more of an urban artist, and I interfaced with him in Houston when he was down there, and so he was great in terms of revitalizing some of the retail spaces that some of our developer friends had. They were just developing, but there was just missing that sort of glue, like we said. And so he's just been a great friend of the firm. His firm is called United by Design. And so he's got a collective now of muralists that he engages in. And we brought him on board when we started the office here for San Antonio Tech Week. And so we had a space that he just kind of create it. And then when our office came into play, as Cristina said, we wanted him to interpret San Antonio just turned 300 years, so we had a 300 next kind of motif and a criteria.
Nice.
And he created sort of the centerpiece of our office. So yeah, I mean, he's very versatile, but now we're getting into areas of technology too, and how that kind of weaves into it. And so he's on the cusp of it. Internally, we also have our digital experience team that is really kind of that sort of fourth dimension of brand, I think. We have several projects, and we were talking about the AT&T district in Dallas, that headquarters over there, and how technology and that digital experience is really kind of weaving that whole experience together, from indoors to a outdoor side of a building that's about 3 to 4 stories tall.
Wow.
So that is sort of becoming the next sort of palette for us to play with in terms of how to engage, how to refresh, how to kind of communicate.
Sure. Yeah, I've always been kind of fascinated by Anthony, because he, takes the muralist world and then the corporate world and somehow makes that work,
Absolutely.
So that's pretty impressive, yeah.
And he makes it work by creating a little bit more tension. It doesn't have to be the same. And I think when he brings his work, a lot of times it's really kind of a stark contrast a lot of times to the space, and I think that really kind of makes you pause and kind of look at things. Yeah,
that's really interesting. So how is the retail world doing? I know I keep hearing about people, everything's going online, people are pulling back the shelves and things are getting a little empty. Like what are you seeing out there?
Retail believe it or not, is somewhat stable, if not stronger than
good.
most industries out there.
Sure.
We're seeing it as being a pretty good part of our business still. They talk about luxury brands. Luxury brands always still figure out a way. They
Sure.
try to reinvent themselves. They'll get the influencers. They'll get the next dimension of how they kind of showcase their products. The Cadillac experience. There's one in Shanghai that opened up, and it's purely a museum. It's more of an experience center. So they say don't say it's a showcase. It's really an experience center, because you start really understanding how the craft is in terms of and the legacy of what that means. And so it's just a beautiful kind of play. When you talk about mainstream retail, people are still trying to figure out how bricks and mortars are doing. People still want to touch and feel the products. And so, even though they have stores that have strong online presence, they still feel like they need that bricks and mortar. And when we were in retail years and years ago with the Gap, it was always about the 2-year model. So every 2 years you got to reinvent yourself.
Interesting.
And so that's sort of the pace and the cycle. Nowadays, it's almost you got to reinvent yourself faster and faster.
Wow,
It
I
seems
can only
like.
imagine.
Yeah.
And the budgets for that, you know?
Exactly. And then there's different aspects of retail, like the food and beverage retail world. They're going to be fine. People still have to eat, right? So,
Right, yeah. And they don't want to cook sometimes.
exactly. But the offerings are just getting larger and larger. So
Got
as far as the future of retail, I think there's still going to be that aspect of people wanting to touch, feel, smell, and get the sensory aspect that we were just talking about.
That intersection of art and design, you all at Gensler San Antonio have a gallery program. I'd love to talk to you, and Cristina, you run that. You head it up with one other person. Could you talk a little bit about the Gallery at Gensler program?
Yeah, sure. So about 2 years ago, myself and Michael Rodriguez, one day, we were just in the office, and at the time we didn't really have any art on the walls other than our mural by Anthony. And we were just kind of doing some research. I mean, stuff we already know, that art helps with productivity in the office. And so we thought, why not let's bring art into the office, but also engage with our community and support a local artist. So we set up a presentation, went to our principals, and we came up with the idea of Gallery at Gensler, where it's a rotating exhibit. So we'll have an artist featured for about 6 months, and we really just give them full range. These are the walls that you can use. Go ahead and display your art. And then we have a kickoff event, which allows us to invite clients, potential clients, other artists to our office. And really it just allows for a night of, drinks, food, networking, and supporting our community.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think you've had, how many have you had now?
So we just had our 4th one last week already.
Okay, yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, I was able to go. It was really, I always
thank you
enjoy
for
it.
coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the artist Jason, how did you all get connected with him?
So Jason was actually referred by our previous artist, which was Angelica Raquel. She was actually a student of his, so he's a professor at UTSA, an art professor. Really, we've had great feedback from all of our artists. Really, they're just thankful to be able to, display their art. And we're always looking for different types. We always want to showcase different types of art to really just provide a voice for the different styles of art that they have and the different messages that are in the meaning of their art. Eventually, we have a long enough list of a directory of our artists. So that way, whenever we have these clients who are looking to engage with a local artist and have art in their spaces, we have this list that we can recommend to them. So now, not only are we helping our client by providing great art that we know we've vetted, but also by helping the artists that we previously featured.
That's fantastic. So you're literally kind of integrating it potentially into some of your projects. That's really great. That's fantastic.
If we're talking on the art subject,
Yeah,
one of our
absolutely.
early projects in the office was for a nonprofit foundation called SAC
Oh, yes.
here in town. And so that idea of being able to be part of the community, being able to kind of connect with art in a different fashion, that's true, near and dear to our hearts. We continue to work with that group. But education's key in a lot of areas, and we just finished the KIP program, that campus on the west side of town as well. So again, any way that we can kind of build in with the community, we oftentimes look at how to extend our projects platform. You know, and some of the areas on the east side of town, and these types of projects that we're working on currently right now, we're not just looking at it from bricks and mortar and filling in the voids of, you know, the interior spaces. We're really looking at what's the meaning, what's the purpose of it being part of that community, and what's the dialogue that we can have with our
Right.
neighbors and the adjacencies.
Oh, yeah,
So
definitely.
that's one of our biggest kind of effort in the last few months.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, I really look forward to seeing all of the projects that you all are working on, both here and away. And thank you all so much for joining us today.